Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something really central to modern medicine and tech. It's this whole question of how cloud computing is changing things for the pharmaceutical industry, specifically how they handle data, and crucially, what kind of safeguards absolutely need to be locked down.
Right.
Now, you, our listener, you've sent over some really fascinating materials touching on, well, all sorts of angles in drug development.
Yeah, quite a range.
So our mission for this deep dive is essentially to unpack how the cloud is making it possible to store and analyze these just enormous data sets that pharma research generates. But maybe even more importantly, we need to really focus on why things like cybersecurity, good data management, and keeping regulators happy are so non-negotiable in this space.
It's a really pivotal moment, I think, the amount of data and how complex it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's exploding. You see it across the board, drug discovery, clinical trials, manufacturing, even checking how drugs perform after their launch. Your sources definitely paint that picture.
Yeah, they do.
And it just demands new kinds of solutions. So it's less about if pharma will use the cloud and more about how they could do it safely and effectively.
Okay, let's set the stage a bit. This data challenge, it's almost hard to grasp the scale, isn't it? Your materials on, say, preclinical work or the clinical trial phases, and even that post-market surveillance stuff, it all points to this data tidal wave.
Absolutely. You've
Yeah.
got everything from, the really detailed results from early lab studies
Right.
to just mountains of data coming out of human trials. That regulatory and pharmacovigilance transcript really highlights that. And then there's manufacturing data, process details, plus that constant stream of info coming back once a drug is actually being used by patients.
And we have to remember what kind of data this is, yeah.
Critically important.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about super valuable proprietary research secrets.
The company's future, basically.
Exactly. And then there's the patient data from trials, often incredibly detailed personal identifiable information, plus manufacturing processes, adverse event reports.
Hmm.
Each piece is incredibly sensitive. If it gets compromised, well, the fallout is huge.
Right. So handling this flood of sensitive stuff,
Yeah,
it needs more than just like servers in the basement, right?
definitely. The old on-premise systems often struggle. And that's really where cloud computing starts to look attractive.
So for anyone maybe not fully up to speed, when we say cloud computing here, what exactly are we talking about?
We're basically talking about using a network of remote servers, huge data centers run by companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, accessed over the internet. Instead of buying and managing all your own hardware locally, you're essentially renting computing power, storage, software over the internet. It's a shift to a distributed web-based model.
Kind of like outsourcing your IT infrastructure in a way.
That's a good way to think about it, yeah. For pharma, the big draws are things like better accessibility, researchers getting data wherever they are,
Uh-huh.
much greater scalability, being able to handle those big data peaks and valleys, and often it can be more cost-effective than building and running massive data centers yourself.
Okay, let's dig into those benefits. Scalability and flexibility. That sounds like it would really map onto the drug development lifecycle.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. A small biotech doing early research has totally different data needs than a big pharma company running, say, global phase 3 trials
Mm.
involving thousands of patients.
Right, massive difference in scale.
Exactly. And cloud platforms offer that elasticity. You can crank up your storage and computing power when you're generating tons of data, like during a big trial,
Okay.
and then scale it back down afterwards. You're mostly paying for what you actually use.
Yeah.
That avoids needing huge upfront investments in hardware that might sit idle half the time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of financial and operational sense. And what about the accessibility and collaboration piece? Pharma research is so global now.
That's another huge one. Cloud can really break down those geographical silos. Teams in different countries, different institutions can potentially access and work on the same data sets almost in real time.
So speeding things up, potentially?
Potentially, yes. Imagine researchers in, say, Europe and the US analyzing clinical trial data together without cumbersome data transfers. It could definitely accelerate analysis and, maybe even shorten development timelines.
Okay, and the advanced analytics. Your sources on AI in drug development really point towards needing serious computing muscle. Is that easier in the cloud?
Yes, that's a major advantage. The big cloud providers offer this whole ecosystem of sophisticated tools, machine learning platforms, AI services, tools for handling massive big data sets.
So linking back to those AI source materials.
Exactly. The kind of complex algorithms and, frankly, the enormous data sets you need for effective machine learning and drug discovery. Trying to do that efficiently on local machines would be, well, difficult if not impossible for many.
Right.
The cloud provides that scalable power and storage, so it directly enables the kind of advanced research you were looking at. Researchers can tap into these tools to find subtle patterns, generate insights, maybe find new drug targets faster.
Okay, so the upside seems pretty compelling. Scalability, collaboration, advanced tools. But this is the big but, isn't it? Cybersecurity. Putting all this incredibly sensitive pharma data out there in the cloud? That feels risky.
It absolutely introduces risks, significant ones. It's one thing to store, I don't know, holiday snaps.
Yeah.
It's entirely different when you're talking about patient health records, clinical trial results, proprietary chemical structures.
So what happens if things go wrong? A data breach in this context sounds catastrophic.
It can be. You're looking at potentially losing priceless intellectual property to competitors, facing massive fines from regulators, devastating damage to the company's reputation, and worst of all, potentially exposing sensitive patient information. That erodes public trust, not just in the company, but maybe in the whole research enterprise.
The stakes are incredibly high then. We hear about cyber attacks on hospitals and research places. That must be a constant worry.
It is. Those attacks can steal data, lock up systems with ransomware. It can halt research, impact patient care. So yes, securing data in the cloud isn't just a nice-to-have for pharma.
It's fundamental.
Absolutely fundamental. It's about ethical responsibility as much as technical necessity.
Okay, so what are the absolute essentials? If a pharma company is using the cloud, what security measures are just table stakes?
All right, several things are critical. First up, strong data encryption. Always. Meaning you scramble the data, making it unreadable without the right key. And this needs to happen both in transit when data is moving between systems and at rest when it's just sitting stored on a server.
Like a secret code only authorized people can decipher.
Exactly. It's a foundational defense. If someone unauthorized gets access somehow, the data itself is hopefully useless to them.
Okay, encryption non-negotiable. What else?
Very tight access controls, granular access controls.
So who gets to see what?
Precisely. You need strict systems to check who is trying to access data that's authentication, and then systems to control exactly what data they're allowed to see or change based on their role that's authorization.
Makes sense. Least privilege principle, right? Only give access that's strictly needed.
That's the idea. Someone in marketing shouldn't be able to browse raw clinical trial patient data, for example. Roles and responsibilities have to dictate access.
Okay, encryption, access controls, is that enough? Just set it up and forget it?
Definitely not. You need continuous security monitoring and regular audits. It's absolutely vital.
Why continuous?
Because the threats are always changing. New vulnerabilities pop up, attackers develop new techniques. You have to be constantly watching your cloud environment for any suspicious activity. And then you need periodic, thorough security audits to proactively look for weaknesses and make sure your defenses are still up to scratch against the latest threats.
Right, it's an ongoing battle, not a one-time fix.
Exactly.
And regulations. Pharma is so heavily regulated, there must be specific rules about cloud data security.
Oh, absolutely. Companies using the cloud have to navigate this complex web of regulations. Things like IP in the US for health information, GDPR in Europe for personal data, plus specific pharma guidelines like GXP, which relate to data integrity. Now, your source materials didn't explicitly detail, say, GXP cloud validation specifics, but the overall regulatory focus on data integrity and patient privacy makes it crystal clear.
So regulators expect proof that data is safe in the cloud.
They do. You need to demonstrate you have the right technical measures, the right organizational policies, the right documentation to show your cloud setup meets those stringent requirements.
Okay, so it sounds like using the cloud isn't just about the tech, it forces you to be really disciplined about data management overall.
That's a great way to put it. You can't have strong cloud security without a solid foundation of good data governance. That means things like ensuring data integrity is the data accurate, complete, reliable, maintaining high data quality from the start, and having really clear policies and procedures for everything. How data gets collected, how it's stored, processed, backed up, archived, who's responsible for it. That data stewardship piece is key.
Right. And practically speaking, what about things like backups, disaster recovery? What if a cloud provider has an outage, or worse?
Essential planning. You absolutely need robust, regularly tested backup procedures for cloud data and a clear disaster recovery plan. What happens if there's a major disruption? Could be technical, could be a cyber attack, could even be a physical event at a data center. How do you get critical systems back online quickly and minimize data loss? That has to be mapped out.
Okay. Let's try and connect this back to some of the actual research mentioned in your OPR&D source materials. Even if they don't explicitly say we used the cloud,
Right.
it feels like these principles must apply. Like that source and structure activity relationship study is using NMR spectroscopy that sounds like it generates incredibly complex data.
It certainly would.
Yeah.
And while a research paper might not detail the IT infrastructure,
Sure.
the kind of sophisticated analysis involved there, it almost certainly relies on significant computing power and storage. It's highly probable that cloud resources are providing that scalability behind the scenes. And of course, the security of those novel research findings would be paramount wherever the number crunching actually happens.
And what about collaboration? We saw that Nature article excerpt in the Handbook of Medicinal Chemistry with a huge list of authors.
Yeah, that suggests a large, likely multi-institutional effort, maybe involving complex data sets like genomics, perhaps.
Possibly.
Well, in that kind of scenario, multiple teams, maybe in different places, working on shared data. A secure cloud environment is often the most practical way to provide that central, accessible platform. It can streamline collaboration compared to, emailing massive data sets around, provided those strict security and access controls we talked about are in place.
Hmm.
Even for developing a single drug candidate, like that cysteine protease inhibitor case study you had. Think about all the data accumulating over time. In vitro tests, animal studies, formulation data, eventually clinical trials.
It adds up.
It really adds up. You need a system to manage all that securely and ensure its integrity over the long haul. The cloud, if implemented properly with strong security and governance, can provide that.
So it's kind of like the hidden enabler. The science gets the spotlight, but secure, scalable data management, often via the cloud, is what makes a lot of it possible.
I think that's fair to say. The cutting-edge science detailed in your sources, it's increasingly fueled by complex data analysis. And that analysis often relies, practically speaking, on cloud capabilities.
Hmm.
But the absolute bedrock has to be that commitment to security and good data practices. That's what allows the innovation to happen safely and ethically.
This has been really, really insightful, a crucial area for sure. So for you, our listener, wrapping this up, the main takeaways seem pretty clear, right? Cloud computing offers some really significant advantages for pharma handling data, analyzing it, maybe speeding up development. Huge potential.
Huge potential, yes.
And it's a big, but realizing that potential hinges completely on getting the security right. Robust cybersecurity measures, really solid data management habits, and playing by the regulatory rules, they're not optional.
No, they're absolutely essential. Getting this right isn't just, good IT practice. It's fundamental.
Yeah.
It's about protecting that valuable research, safeguarding patient privacy, and ultimately maintaining trust in the whole pharmaceutical R&D process. The choices companies make now about cloud and security, they'll echo for years.
Definitely. Okay, so here's a final thought to leave you with. As pharma keeps generating more and more complex data, just staggering amounts of it, how is this balancing act going to evolve? How do you keep harnessing the power and flexibility of the cloud while truly guaranteeing the security of that incredibly sensitive data? What new challenges or maybe new innovations are we going to see at this critical intersection in the next few years? Something to chew on. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.